Conservative politics and economics have dominated the United States for the last 50 years. Are we coming to the end of that cycle? I think so. Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. The piece that I published this morning over at HartmannReport.com, there are two Hartmann reports. There's the free podcast, which you can find, wherever you find podcasts, and then there's the daily, my daily writing. Every morning, I get up really early, and sometimes I do a little bit of work on it, the night before. But and we bang out this. I write up this piece that is typically the same thing as my opening rant or my first hour, and we posted it at HartmannReport.com. You can get that right in your mailbox for free. And there will be eventually some a little other content that we'll add to it that there may be a charge for, but everything is free right now, and will continue to be most all of it will continue to be free forever. So that's at HartmannReport.com. And the piece that I published today, I think it really reflects the message that I've been inching towards in my conversations with you, which is that but I haven't just laid it out, and I'm going to do that right now, and then I'll pick up your phone calls for the rest of the hour. And that is that we are at the end of an era. Peter Turchin published a really provocative piece about a decade ago, 10 years ago, in Nature magazine. And in that piece, he pointed out that politics tends to go in roughly 50-year cycles. Sometimes they're as short as 40 years, sometimes they go as long as 60 years, but typically the sweet spot is 50 years. And he pointed out that 1971, well, he didn't point it out, he just referenced that period of time. I pointed out in my piece over at HartmannReport.com that 1971 was when the Powell Memo was written. It was when the entire right mobilized. Within 4 or 5 years of that, you had the Federalist Society created, the Heritage Foundation created, the Charles Koch Foundation became the Cato Institute. You had state policy networks started growing in every single state. We now have a billionaire-owned and driven political infrastructure with all of these groups that is larger than the Republican Party itself. So I had a great conversation last night with Dean Obeidallah on his show here on Sirius XM, and we were talking about this and just laying this out. Like, why do Republicans, for example, the tax cut that Trump pushed through back in 2017 had 25% approval among the American public, 25% according to Quinnipiac. And every Republican voted for it. This American Relief Act, which is what Biden is calling it now, has 65% approval, more or less, across the board. And even a majority of Republicans approve of it. It depends on which study you're looking at and when it was done, because Fox News has been pounding on it how horrible it is for, a couple of weeks now. So, they are capable of shifting opinions. But the bottom line is it's very, very popular, and yet every Republican voted against it. And you ask why? Well, because it's not the Republicans who control the Republican Party. It's a handful of right-wing, cranky right-wing billionaires who put their, who use their money to basically buy politics. And I think their day has come to an end. I think this 50-year cycle, since 1971 to 2021, that's 50 years. Or from Reagan to today, that's 40 years. Reagan became president in January of 1981. And if you look at those cycles, I think that I'm going out on a limb here, but I really believe that you and I will be having this conversation a year, 2 years, 3 years, certainly 4 or 5 years down the road, looking back and saying the American Recovery Act and Joe Biden's speech, and I get it, Joe Biden is no Bernie Sanders, but nonetheless, we are going to be looking back at this moment and saying the American Recovery Act and Joe Biden's speech marked the beginning of the turn. The beginning of the end of the era of Reaganomics. And I point out in my piece over at HartmannReport.com that the thing that really brought it to a head was the Trump presidency. He was so, and the vaccine, for example, is emblematic of that. While the New York Times, as Eric Bullock points out, the New York Times is saying, their headline, Biden got the vaccine rollout humming with Trump's help. Well, no, he got it running over Trump's objections, over Trump's obstruction. Trump gave an absolute screaming disaster to Joe Biden. I mean, the Wall Street Journal, this is back in December. Pfizer had its 100 million dose goal in place until mid-November when it became clear the supply chain hurdles were too great for an end-of-the-year timeline. Did Trump do anything? No, he went playing golf. What Biden has done is he's used the Defense Production Act to fill in that supply chain, to give these companies the raw materials that they need and to help people who are administering shots with gloves and vials and the vials are for the manufacturers, syringes, things like that. Trump did none of that. Instead he kept telling us how wonderful everything is and the vaccine is going to go away any minute. And you'll recall on January 15th, when Trump still had 5 days in office, and he and Jared Kushner had been saying that there was this huge national stockpile of vaccines. And our governor, Kate Brown, here in Oregon, tweeted on January 15th of this year, quote, last night I received disturbing news confirmed to me directly by General Perna of Operation Warp Speed. States will not be receiving increased shipments of vaccines from the national stockpile next week because there is no Federal Reserve of doses. There wasn't even a real federal stockpile. Trump was grifting again. Our governor, Kate Brown, she said, I'm demanding answers from the Trump administration. This was later that day. I am shocked and appalled that they would have set an expectation on which they could not deliver with such grave consequences. This is a deception on a national scale. Oregon seniors, teachers, all of us were depending on the promise of Oregon's share. So, the grift, I think, is what brought it to a head. But I really believe that this 40-year era of Reaganomics has come to an end. There's still a lot of thrashing and, dying going on, and there's a few hangers-on like Joe Manchin